Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name is David Kenny. I'm Senior Business One Consultant here with Milner Browne, and today we're going to use this webinar to look at some of the simple functions within the system to allow for the import and export of data from Excel. Okay, so what we're looking at is we're looking at the standard import from Excel. We're looking at import of fixed asset master data from Excel, and the import of transactions from SAP, export of transactions from SAP Business One. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch across to the software. As you'll see, I'm using SAP Business One version 9.2, patch level 06. Okay, just for your information, version 9.3 is due out before the end of the year, so we will be coming back to you when that gets released to go through and share with you some of the new features and so on within that. Okay, so some of the functionality to upload from Excel, okay, at a very simple level, we can write, copy and paste individual lines and cells to business partners. So for example, if we go in and we look at a business partner within the system and we bring up our first business partner here, which is Maxitech. Okay, so if I want to copy in a phone number, what I can do is I can pick that up from an Excel sheet or whatever. So if I put in my number as 01 123 456 78, okay, and I simply right click and using standard Excel functionality, go through and copy that, okay, I can then go back into SAP, right click in the field that I want to paste into, and select the option paste, okay, and that goes through copying that into the system just as standard, okay, and that's functionality that has been there for quite some time at this stage. Obviously, if I want to go through and save that, I click on update and go through and update my business partner, saving down that phone number against the business partner. Okay, so we can copy information, be it from an email, so an email address, a phone number on an email, from a Word document or from an Excel spreadsheet into single fields within, as I've done here against business partners, but basically against any record or any transaction screen within the system. So that's at a very basic level. Okay, if I then go to financials, and we go through and look at journals, okay? Oftentimes people, when we're out on site and so on, people ask, okay, what's the handiest way to load a journal from Excel into the system, okay? So what we can do is we can go through and obviously we can tab through, bring up our GI code, put through our debit and credit values and so on and work through on that. So that's obviously the manual journal entry going through on the system. Now, what we can also do is we can just cancel that to go back in here, go back into my journal entry screen. I can copy and paste information from an Excel spreadsheet. So going back here to Excel, okay, and if I look at sheet 1 here, so what I've done in column A here is I put in 2 GI codes, I've left column B blank, and then column C and D I put in values against them. So if we go back to our journal entry screen and look at it in column terms, our GL code would be column A. The GL name is column B, which I've left blank. And then we have debit and credit values. Okay, so what I can do is I can go through here and I could highlight the cells that I want to copy. Again, right click, go copy, or Control C to copy that information. And then what I can do is I can go back into my journal entry, I can put in the necessary header information, and then down in the details section, what I can do is I can right click and select paste and go through and paste in my journal. Okay, so you'll see column A being the GI code, column B I left blank because that's going to get populated based on the actual GL account name, or sorry, the GL account code is going to pull through the GL account name, and then the debit and credit values are going to pull through automatically from the spreadsheet as well. So that's, I can then go through, click and add, and that's a journal posted through. Okay, now what I can do also is if I wanted to get a format for that, So in my spreadsheet, what I did was I just typed in the values and so on. But what I can do is I can actually copy that from Excel. So I could right-click and I select copy to table. Okay. And within there, if I just paste and we go to a new sheet here, if I right-click and paste that in here, you'll see it has copied out the column names into the spreadsheet for me. So as a guideline, if I'm not sure what columns I want to use, I can start off with that as my template. Now, from there then, obviously, I can go through, delete the lines, I can put in different codes, or for today's demo, I'm just going to go through and we will just amend the values of journal. Okay, sorry, I should have put that in as 0.00 there. Okay, it actually doesn't, we can get away with just 500 because it'll recognize it as £500, but if I want to put in pence there or cents, I can go through and work on that. Okay, so to copy that back in, again, I just highlight my cells. Along here, I want to add a new journal, so Control A, and right-click and paste that within there. So the system is then pasting in whatever fields. So that can be used, for example, month-end journals where somebody wants to prepare a journal in Excel and copy and paste it into the system. The key thing to remember is that the columns in your Excel spreadsheet need to line up with columns in SAP. Okay, so it may be a case that you will use form settings to go through and decide what columns get displayed and what columns don't get displayed and so on in terms of your settings. Okay, now that functionality is obviously there as standard within the system. As I've said, it can be used with journal entries and so on. It can also be used for the likes of stock adjustments. So if somebody wants to go through and do an issue of stock and so on, they can use it for that. Or other places where we've seen it used is, for example, customers sending through sales orders. So we're saying, okay, well, the customer is sending us in a spreadsheet and we want to load that up easily into the system. Well, again, if we look at our sales order screen here, once our columns are showing our item number, our description, our quantity and so on, then we can copy and paste our information from an Excel spreadsheet in on the system. Okay, so it's a very simple, a very easy way to get data from your Excel spreadsheet into SAP Business One. It's predominantly around the transactions, so you're copying in transaction detail lines from Excel into the system, but it is very useful. Okay, so it's quite simple and easy to use. Okay, so that is very much on the transaction side. So journals, stock transactions, sales orders, deliveries, whatever we can be used on that. Okay. Another function that is within the system for importing directly from Excel is if we go into administration and we have an option here for data import and export. Okay, so within here and we go to data import, you'll see we've import from Excel, import transactions from SAP Business One. We can import fixed asset master data, and we have financial template import wizard. Okay, and then we also have data export options there as well. So exporting transactions from SAP Business One. Okay, so again, just keeping this at a fairly high level, I want to go through and look at some of the imports from Excel. So if I go through here to look at import from Excel, the first thing we see here is we have a data type to import. And we'll see business partners is within the menu there at a minute. And if I click and drop down here, we have business partners, we have items, so our stock items, price list, so our individual price list, and then business partner catalog numbers. So there are the four options we have to import directly from a spreadsheet into the system. Okay. Now, again, it's a fairly simple option. So if we look at business partners here at the minute, we would then go through and we would select the file we want to import. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go through here to my desktop, and if I look at my customer file, what I have here is I have just simply put in two customers. So I have my customer code, I have my customer name, and an indication that they're a customer as opposed to supplier. Okay, so that's all I put into my spreadsheet, and I saved it as a spreadsheet on the system. So in order to go through and import those, firstly I want to browse to my file. So I want to go through to my desktop and to WebEx, and within here it's looking for a text file, but you'll see we also have the options there for Excel and for a CSV file and so on. So I know my file is a Excel 2007, and there's my customer file. Okay, so again, knowing that I had a customer code, customer name, BP code, BP name, and BP type within here. So we can click on the drop down here, so the field in object, and it's giving you the fields that we can update against in SAP Business One. So my first column I want as BP code, my second column I want as BP name, and the third column was BP type. Okay, so I go through and I create a mapping based on that. Okay, and then down here we have import methods. So what do we want to do? Do we want to add new records and update existing records? So basically in this case we want to add new business partners, and also if there is a business partner with that code, do we want to update an existing record? Do we want to add new records without updating existing records, or do we want to update existing records without adding new records? So for the purpose of this, I want to go through and I want to add new records, okay? And in that case then, I would basically just click on import and go through and import my file, okay? So it would go through and work on that. Now, over here, we also have other options whereby I can go through and I can save as a template. So if this was going to be a recurring exercise where we wanted to load business partner data into the system using this format, then I can go through and I can save that as a template. So I would give it a template code and template name, meaning that I can reload that easily from the system. Okay, so if I put in test one and test one as the name there and that, okay, ask me would I like to save the changes, I say yes to that. Okay, so next time I come in, if I just clear my data there, I can go in and I can use the mapping that I've already predefined, and that should go through and pull through that if that was set up correctly within the system. Okay, so that allows you to go through and do business partners. So following on from that, some complexities around the business partners for a minute. We'll see here we have items in blue. So we have bill to or pay to addresses, we have ship to addresses, and so on within there. We also have contacts. So why they're highlighted in blue is that we have multiple options in terms of those. So if customer, so if we're importing Milner Browne as a customer, I want to also import contacts against that. So I may have multiple contacts. So I might have Ian as a contact, I might have myself as a contact, I might have Morgan and so on as contacts within that. So what I want to do then in that case is I want to select my code, my name, and then if I go down and look at contacts, I can go through here and it brings in the detail behind the contact. So it's pre-populated these saying, okay, well, column D then must be first name, middle name, and so on down through that. Okay, so I can go through in that, but if I wanted a second contact to be brought in, I can go down here and select that again. So it's telling me my second contact person would be in column Z on my spreadsheet and working through on that as well. So there's multiple options there within business partners. Okay, so again, to look at items, so for items there, sorry, just going to clear that mapping for a minute. So for items there, okay, again, what we have is we have our item number. You'll see we've price list codes there in blue, kind of so multiple price lists, our item description for our name and so on. So we can use that import from Excel to directly import from a spreadsheet in against the system, okay? And as we see, we can use it for business partners, we can use it for items, we can use it for price lists, and we can use it for business partner catalog numbers, which are basically customer or supplier product codes in the system, okay? So we can go through and use that. Now, not all of the fields that we may want to import are directly exposed to this screen, okay? And for that, we have a separate tool that particularly the consultants would use in terms of starting a new customer site and so on, where we would go through and use that. Now, it's a little bit more difficult to use to get familiar with and so on, but once you're familiar with it, the logic of it is very straightforward, whereby we can go through and we can import directly from text files and CSV files, which I'll come to in a minute, okay? Now, we can also import transactions from a SAP Business One database. So if we want to go through and we want to link to a file from a SAP database, we can do that. We can import fixed asset master data very much in the same way as we had already for the business partners and the items and so on. So again, the same type of logic in terms of what we want to import and so on. And then we also have options there in terms of data export, which I'll come back to in a minute. Okay, so just to switch then, what I want to look at is what we commonly refer to as DTW, or Data Transfer Workbench. So this is a separate application that's available to all users to allow you update information from CSV files and text files into the system. It can be used for both static records, so customers, suppliers, price lists, stock, resources, and so on, but also for transactional information, so the likes of sales orders, sales quotations, sales invoices, stock movements, and so on. And as I say, it's a tool that's regularly used by consultants to go through and load in opening data into the system. So the initial load of your customer and supplier master data, the initial load of opening balances into the system, and so on. So just to give you a quick demonstration, we can go through and we can generate templates. So we can go through and generate templates. One that I've already gone through and generated here is this one here. So if I just delete that there for a minute in terms of the data. So this is what your template would look like. So it's a two-line header, and there are two tooltips against each of them to indicate the type of field it is, the length of field, and so on, and so on. So it very much follows a structured format. If you're using user-defined fields in your system, they can also be included in these imports, which is one advantage of it as well. And we go through and we basically go through and populate data. So for example, I have my card code here, so I'm bringing in same two customers, my card name, customer, and so on. Now it tells you here, so you'll see I have C customer there. If I look here, it tells me the valid values for this field are either C customer, C supplier, or C LID, which is a lead in the system. Okay, so again, there is basic formatting involved in it, but kind of it's fairly intuitive to go through and use. We would go through then and we would save that down as a text file or CSV file in the system. Okay, and then we go back to DTW. Okay, so what I want to do then is I want to run through a typical import that we would use on the system. So I click an import. So you'll see it's wizard driven. So step one, select the data type. So in this case, I want to import customer, so it's going to be master data. Okay, so next, what do I want to do? Do I want to add new data, update existing data? So if it was update to an existing customer, or a combination of adding new data and updating existing data. I'm just going to go with add new data for the minute. Click on next, and what business object we want to link it to. Well, we know it's against business partners, and in this case it's business partner master data. Okay, so there's a variety of different objects we can link to within here. So I click on next, okay, and what it gives me is the option to link multiple files. So I could have my main business partner data, my addresses, my contacts, I can have Interstat details and so on against a customer and so on from within here. And what I do is I click here to browse and link the file that I'm using to the business object within the system. Okay, so I'm saying, okay, well, here's the file that I want to load in as a business partner. So I move on from step 4. Step 5 is a mapping. So here's the source fields and here's the target fields. So here's the fields in my spreadsheet. Here's what's there in the database. And I go down to those and there's a match on them. Going from there to the sixth step then, it asks me what do I want to do in terms of error handling. So I can cancel the import, okay? I can ignore errors and just import whatever it validates. Or I can say, okay, well, I want to go through and I want to ignore up to, in this case, 1,000 errors, or and process valid records. What I can also do is I can run a simulation, so the system runs a check on the data. So I go through here, it runs a check. It tells me the number of errors detected, so there was no errors detected, and the number of processed 2 out of 2. So it's telling me down here, 2 business objects were imported successfully, 0 were not imported. But bearing in mind that this is a simulation, so it hasn't actually run it yet. So once I'm happy that that is coming back with no errors, then I can click on next, and I can go through and import the data. Okay, so it tells me then what I've imported and so on, and if there were any errors, we can see them within the screen here. So that is just an option there. So if I go in here, so I'm just going to copy my customer code here. So I go back in here into my business partner master data. I click here and I go to paste in my customer code, and it loads up my customer. So that's customer. So the only thing I had was customer code and customer name. I didn't bring in, sorry, I had a phone number in there, but I didn't bring in any email addresses and so on within the system. So that is a very quick run through on data transfer workbench. Again, it's very template driven. There's probably a little bit of training just to get familiar with it and so on, but once you've templates right and you've tested your data, then it can be a very useful tool. Okay, so lastly then, I just want to move on to looking at some of the export options then for Excel. Okay, so we saw earlier on where I went in to look at my journal entry, and what I did was I right-clicked and copied that table out from SAP into an Excel spreadsheet, so I can just go paste and paste it there into that. So it copies and pastes it into an Excel spreadsheet for me. So that's a very quick and easy way to go through and do that. If I go back here to look at that journal, or if I go back in to look at maybe a sales invoice in the system or a sales order even in the system, and we look at a sales order, then what I can do is I can go through and I can export that directly from there into Excel as well. So I can either save it as a text file, or I can go through and save it as a Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so we can go through and run with options within there. Okay. The other thing we can do is we can do lists. So for example, if I wanted to go back into my business partners and I want to generate a list of all my customers, so I'm putting in an asterisk there and I'm saying, okay, well, I want all my customers. So that's giving me a list of all the customers within the database. I can also export that out. So it would export whatever columns are displayed on my screen. Okay. Now we can be clever about that because we can also use form settings, and we can say, okay, well, do you know what? I also want to bring in my let me see here, just trying to get a relevant field. I won't bring in credit card details and so on, but for example, my email address. Okay, so I update that. Okay, now I need to refresh my screen here, so I'm just going to do the same search as I've done already, and it then is bringing in my email address. So if I export that out, now I have my email address per customer being exported out into the system. Okay, so there are clever ways to go through and use that as well within the system. It can also be, that list can also be done on transaction level, so a list of journals, a list of sales invoices, and so on within the system. So that's one option. We also saw earlier when we went into administration and we went to data export, import and export, we have an option there of exporting transactions from the system, okay? And what we can do is we can select the transaction type, so whether we want it as a journal, whether we want it as an invoice and so on, and a date range. So we can go through and select we want purchase invoices or AP invoices in a certain date range, so from the 1st to the 7th to today's date, and we can go through and generate a file for that, so it will be exporting out to the system. The last way that we want to look at is we can go through and we can use our query generator, okay, from the system to go through and export out information. So in terms of our query generator, just to kind of give you a quick run through on it, what we have is we have our sales invoices. So if I go back and bring up my last invoice here, and I also want to go through and I want to switch on my system information, okay? So on this, if I hover my mouse over my customer code, okay, at the top of the invoice, down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see there we have customer/supplier number and then C2000, and you will also see over on that line of text, we have OINV, card code, okay? What that's me is that OINV is the table number that the data is stored in, and card code is the field within that table that the customer code is stored within. So what I can do from there then is if I go to Tools, I go to Queries and Query Generator, what I can do is quickly write a query. So my table that I want to look at is OINV, which is my sales invoice table. And down here it's giving me all of the fields, so we'll see card code there, which we looked at earlier on. So card code, card name. So what I'm doing is double clicking on the lines and it's bringing it into my select statement up here, okay? And I might want my document number and I might want a posting date, okay? So assuming that's all I want at this stage, I can execute that, okay? So it's giving me a list of all the customers, dates, and so on. I can put in parameters against it, so I could put in, for example, date ranges and so on. So it's giving me that information. And again, I can quickly export that out to an Excel spreadsheet. So I can basically click on Excel. I want it as an Excel sheet. Click and save. Do you want it to export currency symbols? So now there's no currency symbols in the export that I'm doing, so I'm going to say no to that. And that then goes through and opens that up as an Excel spreadsheet. So that's the data directly from SAP into a spreadsheet. Okay. So just to recap, we started with looking at copying and pasting simple information like a customer email address or phone number from a spreadsheet or from an email directly into update the business partner within the system. So that's standard functionality within the system. It has been there for quite some time. We also then looked at the transaction type imports. So for what we looked at was we looked at our journal, how we could go through and copy our journal from a spreadsheet into the system at a very basic level. If we want a template, we can copy and paste an existing journal out of the system to get our columns and our forms set up correctly and so on. We then went through to talk how we could use that for stock transactions, and we also talked about how we could use that logic for sales orders. So if we have a customer that's sending in orders on a spreadsheet, rather than having to retype them, once they're in the correct format, we can go through and copy and paste them into the system, so saving time there and that. Okay. From there then we went to look at our data export tools. So we saw here how we could, our data import tools, how we could import from Excel and go through against business partners, against items, our price list and our business partner catalog numbers. We saw in business partners how we could go through and we can bring in multiple contacts and multiple addresses and so on within there. So that's again another option for importing directly from Excel. We then went through and we looked at the SAP DTW or Data Transfer Workbench tool, which is a separate application which again is available to all users to upload both static data, so customer supplier data, and transactional data such as journal, sales invoice and so on into the system. Okay, so they were the main options in terms of importing, and then we looked at exporting from SAP into Excel. So we have our data export option within administration. We can use the standard export function that has been there within the system for quite some time, whereby we can export directly to Excel from here. We looked at pulling up a customer list, whereby then we can export that, and we can use our form settings to decide what columns we want to display in that, and we can go through it and use that. And then lastly, we looked there at using a query to go through and to export, write a simple query within the system, and then export that data out into the spreadsheet as I have here. Okay, so I'm hoping that gives you some flavor of the options that we have within the system for data import and export from and to Excel. And that concludes the presentation for today in terms of the demo. Thank you very much for your time.